Welcome back to the Entertainment and Sports Spotlight Podcast, everybody. I'm host Ashley Marie, and we do really appreciate you tuning in with us today. We've got a cool angle going into the basketball world since we are in the playoffs right now for the NBA, and the WNBA is closely approaching us. We have a really great person to talk with us today about this and who has a very passionate heart from childhood, Zachary Draves is joining us today. He is a sports journalist, and we're really excited to have Zachary with us on the show. Thanks so much for being with us today, and excited to hear your take on this side of sports with basketball and the NBA, WNBA.
Great to be with you, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit, sports journalist. I think that's what a lot of people dream about getting into, right? So how did you make it a reality?
It's been quite a journey, to say the least. A lot of ebbs and flows, and a lot of getting used to all the bells and whistles out there, especially in today's media landscape. And when I was a kid, I was always drawn to sports media, but at a young age, I don't think I ever really conceived in my mind that I wanted to be a sports journalist. I just knew I was drawn to ESPN. I was drawn to documentaries. I was drawn to Sports Illustrated, all different kinds of magazines and books pertaining to sports and sports history, which is a big passion of mine and something that I try to tell stories about in my work as a journalist as many times as possible, especially when it's fitting and when it's timely. And so it's just always been there for me, but I guess I never really thought about it until way later in life. And I went through college. I interned at a local TV station. I wrote for the school paper. I had a campus radio station. So I dabbled in it and took a journalism class. And I'm from Rockford, Illinois, by the way. So I went to Rockford University, and I was under the assumption that I was going to get hired at the TV station that I was interning at for 2 summers. And then by the time graduation hit, which was May of 2014, there was nothing there for me. And to make a long story short, I went through years and years of just ups and downs and uncertainty, fear, anxiety, depression. Felt like something was missing, and there was just a lot that went on during that time. And it wasn't until, ironically enough, the pandemic during COVID, where I actually got back into sports journalism as I had intended to, or as I saw it. And obviously, as we all remember, during that time we had a lot more time on our hands to be able to think things through. And so I was able to get back into it, doing some blogging little by little, doing some podcasting. And then 2021 rolls around, and that's when I went into it, starting literally up off the ground, just seeking out as many opportunities as possible. And fortunately, in today's times, there's a lot more accessibility in terms of opportunities to be a sports journalist, and different avenues that you can take, and a lot of and you can just create your own content just right in front of you with your computer, your phone, whatever the case may be. And I just got back into it. And I think the first real assignment that I took on in 2021 was covering the Olympic swimming trials in Omaha, Nebraska. And that was a really amazing experience. I had the chance to cover some really big names in Olympic swimming. That was Ryan Lochte's final shot to go for an Olympics. I had the good fortune to ask him a question in the press room after he failed to qualify for the 50 free. And he was already emotional at that point in time, but I think I made him cry a little bit harder, just because I asked him a question that pertained to 2 of the younger swimmers that were following in his footsteps, Ryan Murphy and Michael Andrews, who had qualified for the Olympic team. And I asked them, because they were in the presser prior, and I asked him, Michael and Ryan were in here, and they were talking about what you've meant to them, and how you've been really good to them and so forth. How does that make you feel when you hear that? And he was already emotional, but then he got a little bit more emotional after I asked him that. But I just thought it was very genuine at that moment. However you may feel about Ryan Lochte, obviously he's not going to live down what happened in 2016 in Rio, when he lied about being burglarized at a Rio gas station and so forth. But then it was just on from there. And since then, I've had the good fortune of being able to cover a variety of different sports, women's soccer. I've covered auto racing. I've covered college football. And I've also, as you said in the introduction, basketball. Basketball's always been my sport ever since I was a kid. I was surrounded by all different kinds of sports and had an appreciation for them. But basketball was always the mainstay that was there. And so I've been fortunate enough to cover the Chicago Sky as a beat writer for SB Nation, going into my 5th year for that. Covered Iowa women's basketball, so I got to be there to witness Caitlin Clark do her thing, and have had the privilege to be able to talk to her a few times. And then this past year, I had my first go around as the beat reporter for the Chicago Bulls for Clutch Points. And yeah, it's been a journey. It still continues to be a journey. And I just feel like I'm really getting started. And I look forward to seeing what the future holds for me.
That's an incredible story arc of your life. A lot of experience through and a lot of sports. Your progression to where you're at now and getting to cover the Bulls is really impressive. What have you enjoyed the most so far? How do you pick? I don't know.
Honestly, Ashley, it is hard to pick. I will say my fondest moments have been through covering women's basketball, particularly the WNBA and women's collegiate basketball, vis-a-vis Iowa. I got to be there. I've gotten to cover 2 WNBA All-Star games in 2022 in Chicago and 2025 in Indianapolis. Last summer in Indianapolis, I had a ball. It was one of the best experiences I ever had, and I look forward to this year when the WNBA All-Star game comes back to Chicago, although I feel as though it should have been in Atlanta, and I'll explain why a little bit later. But yeah, a lot of those great moments. I mentioned Caitlin Clark. I got to be there to cover her buzzer beaters against Indiana and Michigan State that are just iconic. Her becoming the all-time leading scorer in college basketball history for men's and women's. I got to be there for that, and those were very rewarding experiences. Covering the Chicago Sky and seeing Angel Reese, now she's traded to the Atlanta Dream, but got to be there for her first 2 seasons in Chicago and have had the privilege of being able to talk to her a few times. And yeah, and then through women's basketball, being able to get to interview legends like Lynette Woodard a few times, Ruthie Bolton, Nneka Onwuemeke, Sylvia Fowles, and yeah, I feel like that's like my bread and butter. I do enjoy other sports. I do want to cover other sports. I would say that my biggest goal and my biggest dream is to cover the Olympic Games in 2028 in Los Angeles, and then from that point on. But I would say that women's basketball has always been my bread and butter. Just growing up as a WNBA fan when I was a kid, I remember when the WNBA first started and the New York Liberty were my favorite team. And I was drawn to players like Rebecca Lobo and Lisa Leslie, Cheryl Swoops, and others. I remember as a kid watching Teresa Witherspoon hit the buzzer beater against the Comets in Game 2 of the finals in '99, only to have the Comets come back and win Game 3. And even that was a full circle moment to interview Teresa Witherspoon when she was briefly the coach of the Sky. So I am always of the belief that, and of the mindset that I am happy to cover all different kinds of sports. I want to cover all different kinds of sports and want to be in as many diverse spaces as possible. But as long as women's basketball is there and is a mainstay for me, I'm happy.
That's impressive. Wow. So with the WNBA right around the corner right now, what feels the most significant about where the league is right now in 2026? There's been some major breakthroughs, I feel like, over the past couple of years, but
obviously the biggest breakthrough is the new CBA agreement. Over this past offseason, there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty about whether or not we would have a season, about whether the players would go on strike if they didn't get what they wanted. There were setbacks, there were delays, there was everything that you can imagine. There was heightened tensions between Nafisa Collier, who is of the Players Association, the vice president of the Players Association, who was in charge who was leading the negotiations, and Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner of the league. There was some bad blood that was exchanged between the two of them, and it felt like the season was on the brink. And then towards mid to late March, we get a landmark CBA agreement that the players will get 20% of the revenue shared. The legends of the game will get a one-time $100,000 check, which was incredible. Increased salaries where players can make up to $1 million. Finally, yeah. And there's just so many increased housing benefits, maternal benefits, health benefits, you name it. Everything that the players could ask for or hope for was included in this new CBA. Now, obviously, we still got a long way to go, and years down the road, a new CBA will be negotiated. But for now, this CBA really does charter a new course for women's basketball. And I wrote an op-ed about that, connecting the two, about how this new CBA really is the launching pad for what is expected to be a new golden era for women's basketball. And you just factor all that in with the level of talent that's there: the Caitlin Clarks, the Angel Reeses, the Asia Wilsons, the Nafisa Colliers, the Paige Bueckers. These players are household names. And then you look at who's coming down the pike afterwards: Flau'jae Johnson, Juju Watkins, and so many others. And then you bring it back to the Olympics 2028. Keep in mind that the U.S. women's basketball team has won every single gold medal since 1996 in Atlanta, and they haven't skipped a beat ever since. And so you fast forward to 2028, who's going to be on that team? Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Paige Bueckers, possibly Juju Watkins playing in her hometown of Los Angeles, Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, you name it, Ryan Howard, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray. That's going to be one heck of a team come 2028 in Los Angeles that everybody's going to be excited about, and playing on home soil, no less, right? Yeah. So you just factor all these things in, and you see the rise in visibility and popularity of women's college basketball. It would have been unfathomable just 5-10 years ago for folks to fill out their brackets come March Madness, and it includes the men's and the women's tournaments.
Yeah, crazy.
Just think about that.
Do you feel like the WNBA right now, where it's at, is finally catching up to the quality of basketball, or do you feel like the lead is still ahead of what's being covered?
That's a good question. I would say probably a little bit of both. I think in the WNBA, the game is horizontal, whereas in the NBA, it's more vertical.
Right.
And because of that, in the WNBA, there's a lot more emphasis on the fundamentals of the game. So there's something pure about that, because we have a plethora of sports purists that like the game to be simple, for the game to not get beyond its simplicity. And so when you watch the WNBA, it gets back to the basics of how to play the game, and is not as driven or as overshadowed by highlights or there's individual talent and individuals to watch out for.
Right.
But in terms of the style of the game, the analytics of the game, it's still very much in keeping with the fundamentals of the game. And then I just think that the media is starting to recognize that. Keep in mind, the WNBA has been around for 30 years. They're going into their 30th season. And so in the beginning, the WNBA, there was a lot of hype, there was a lot of promotion, there was a lot of anticipation. You had these instrumental figures that were carrying the league on their shoulders: Cheryl Swoops, Lisa Leslie, Rebecca Lobo, etc. And then after a period of time, especially when their careers started to come to an end, and then you started seeing more and more stars emerge. You saw Diana Taurasi, you saw Sue Bird, you saw Candace Parker, you saw other players come down the pike, but they didn't have this heightened visibility or the promotion or the marketing of the league in the way that they did in the beginning and in the way they do certainly now. And so it's gone through its periods of ebbs and flows. The biggest example that I can think of just how far the WNBA has come in terms of popularity, visibility, and seriousness is the New York Liberty in 2018, 2019 were playing in a recreation center, basically. They were playing at a recreation center or at a college gym that holds about 9,000 or something people. And now they're playing at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, an NBA
Yeah.
arena, and they're playing before sold out crowds and they have celebrities sitting courtside. Just put that into context as far as how far the league has been able to come just from that period of time, which wasn't that long ago, to where we are now.
That is really interesting. As we're heading into the season, what are some of the stories you think that the WNBA deserves to have more attention on, as they're maybe something more than what they're getting right now, something that's going to continue helping shape them this year?
Yeah, I think you can expect Asia Wilson to continue to lead the charge for the Las Vegas Aces. I've said for years now that Asia Wilson is the best all-around player in the league. She can pretty much do anything. She can score from all spots on the floor. She can protect the paint. She can protect the rim. She's a great shot blocker. She has a lot of speed and agility. She can get up and down the floor for someone as tall as her. So you can expect her to just continue to do incredible things this season. Obviously, the New York Liberty, can't count them out with where they're at right now with Sabrina Ionescu and Jonquel Jones and the core that they've been able to establish. So you can't knock them out, even though they don't have the same coach as they did. They're still going to be a really decent team. And then obviously with Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever, obviously they're going to get a lot of attention. They're going to draw a lot of eyeballs because of Caitlin Clark, but also because they have a good young core with them. They got Kelsey Mitchell, they got Aaliyah Boston. They got a really solid core to maintain and to strengthen and grow as time goes on. So you can't count them out. And with Caitlin Clark, she's coming back from a season in which she was injured for most of the year. She only played 13 games, I believe it was, last year, and she was injured for the rest of the season. And so now, and they still managed to get to the playoffs last year, even though not just she was injured, but Sophie Cunningham was injured.
Yeah,
a lot of their other core players were injured.
Yeah, that's right. They were a mess.
Exactly. And they still made it to the playoffs. So now, with everybody back and everybody healthy again, who knows what lies ahead for him. And then for the team that I cover, the Chicago Sky, obviously they traded Angel Reese to the Dream. And the Dream have been a playoff-worthy team over the last few years. They got a really young team. They got a team that really relies on scoring, that relies on offense, that relies on pushing the tempo, which honestly is very much in keeping with Angel's game. And Angel has been a player that has been in need of needing to expand or grow her game, not just in her safe spot or her sweet spot in the paint or on the blocks and getting the rebounds and getting the putbacks. She needs to grow and evolve and expand her horizons in terms of where she scores and whatnot. And I think the Dream will be a team that will value her in that, because with the Sky, in retrospect, they put all this weight on her shoulders to carry the team and to be the franchise player. But then it all fell apart because the Chicago Sky, if we're going to be honest, they are the last independently run WNBA team available, or one of the few WNBA teams available that's independently run, which is why they still play at Wintrust Arena, which is where DePaul University plays, whereas the Fever, like the Aces, they have their own arena. Or you have the Fever that play at Gainbridge Fieldhouse where the Pacers play, or you have the Sparks that play at the Staples Center where the Lakers play. The Sky are still playing in a college arena. And don't get me wrong, Wintrust is a great place. It's a great environment, great atmosphere, all of that. But compared to where the other teams are, it's just not jiving. They're supposed to get a state-of-the-art practice facility. They were supposed to get a state-of-the-art practice facility in Chicago that had all the amenities and all the accoutrements of workout equipment, of healing remedies, of everything that you could imagine that accommodates that. And for the last several years, they've been practicing at the Saks Recreation Center in Deerfield, where on one side of the court, or at a court, or at two or three courts down at the far end, a pickleball tournament is happening. And then maybe in between that, they got kids playing 3-on-3 basketball. And then at the far end, the Sky have their own court, but they're practicing in a facility that is basically the equivalent of the YMCA, right?
Crazy.
So yeah, and then budget issues and timing and logistical matters and all of these things, delays have gotten in the way. And then the minority owner was sued by an investor of the team for not investing into the team. And then you've had this revolving door of players coming and going, top players in the league, including Candace Parker, including Kalia Copper, and so many others. And then Angel was caught in the mix of all that. And then you've had coaches come and go, and Angel was caught in the mix of that. And by all accounts, she wanted to stay. She didn't want to be traded, but yet they traded her anyway. But at the very least, she's going to a team that's contending, a team that has been to the playoffs, that got some young talent, and she can grow from there. But then the Sky really did made up for it in the free agent market. They got Rakia Jackson, they got Dejanay Carrington, they got Skylar Diggins, they got JC Sheldon, they got all of these amazing young players and veteran players that have playoff experience, some of them that have tangibles and assets that the Sky have been lacking, particularly when it comes to scoring, because the Sky has not been a team in the last several years that has really emphasized about scoring, particularly from the three-point line. So to have players come in that have that pedigree is a must for them. And they still got some solid young talent. They got Camila Cardoso, who's coming off a remarkable season last year. You got Elizabeth Williams, who is a veteran post player. You got Rachel Banham, who's lights out from the three-point line. So they have a solid group, and they also have some veterans and young talent coming in to hopefully be able to forge a new era for the Sky. We'll see what happens, but they really impressed a lot of people by aggressively pursuing the free agent market the way that they did, just immediately right after they traded Angel.
Yeah, those are some smart moves. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year for them. And with Toronto and Portland joining the league this year, slipping a little bit here, how as important is like this expansion moment for the WNBA, do you think?
It's important from the standpoint of the WNBA being able to go into different markets and to be able to grow from that aspect. Obviously, it's a sign of your league's success when the league is expanding, when cities are willing to put up the money to have a franchise, and when franchise valuations are through the roof as they are right now, it only makes sense. And so now you're getting Toronto, you get Portland. In the years ahead, you're going to get Cleveland, you're going to get Philadelphia, you're going to get Detroit. And also keep in mind that some of these cities have had WNBA teams before. Cleveland had a team, Detroit had a team, the Detroit Shock that has won WNBA championships. The Portland Fire, they were a team back in the day with Jackie Stiles, the great Jackie Stiles, who was their franchise player and a standout talent. So it's only a logical progression of where things are. The only thing is that I've heard a lot of my colleagues and others have said is that it's great that the league is expanding, but is it going to be the same? Is it going to be business as usual? In other words, okay, we're going to expand teams. That's great. But are there still going to be a limited number of roster spots? Because what happens is you have all these players that come out of college that get drafted. They try out, they go through training camp, and if they're not good enough, they get waived. And it's not like for all of them or most of them, it's not like they're going to have an international team that's waiting in the wings to sign them up right then and there, just in case. And so for some of these players coming out of college, they try out, they go through training camp, they go with the hope and anticipation that they're going to make it, and then they don't make it, then they're left with nothing. Now what? And so that's something that the league has to really fix in terms of increasing or compelling teams to increase roster spots, so that way you don't have all these players slip through the cracks unnecessarily.
Yeah, there's a huge loss in talent by such a limited roster selection. We're in the NBA playoffs right now. What's standing out to you most about the way that postseason has shaped up to this so far?
I'm not surprised to see the Oklahoma City Thunder sweep the Phoenix Suns in the first round, even with a handful of injuries. I'm not surprised that at all. When you got Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who's arguably the best player in the NBA right now, leading the charge, there's just no stopping the Thunder at this point. It's going to be interesting to see who they will play in the next round, whether it be Houston, the Houston Rockets, or the LA Lakers. Houston is trying to stay alive. They're down 3-1. They won game 4, so Game 5 is set to begin later this week. But for the Lake in that series, there's only so much that LeBron James could do. Don't get me wrong. LeBron James is still one of the best players in the game at 40 years old. He's still killing it. He's still rising to the occasion as he did earlier in the series when he hit that game-tying three-pointer to force it into overtime, and then the Lakers ultimately won. But then also keep in mind, Kevin Durant is hurt for the Rockets, and he's still one of the best players in the game, even at his advanced age. But with that being said, the Lakers can go so far without Luka Doncic and without Austin Reeves. They need them. LeBron can't do it all by himself, so he needs those two to step in. And the Rockets with KD, they're a young team, they're a vibrant team, they're a fresh team. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. And either one will have a difficult time going up against OKC, just because even with a few injuries here and there to some talent, they're still just overall the best team in the league. They have the best player in the league, and they're very defensive minded. They're just one of the best defensive teams in the league. So I don't foresee how they can be stopped in any capacity. And also, if you just look at it from the Western Conference standpoint, the Western Conference, that's where the best teams are.
Yeah.
You got the Thunder, you got the Lakers, you got the Rockets, you got the Spurs. Those are the best teams in the league by far, and the best players in the league by far. On the Eastern Conference, I'm very interested in seeing what's happening right now with the Detroit Pistons. They're down 3-1 to the Orlando Magic, and it's going to be a tough road for them to be able to come back from 3-1. Unless they clean up the turnovers. Cade Cunningham in particular, he can only do so much, and he turned the ball over up to 25 times at this point throughout the series. Mm-hmm. The Magic, they got some young, incredible post players, Jonathan Isaac being one of them. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out. And then also, we can't count Boston out. Boston is a heck of a team with the talent that they still have. Jaylen Brown is arguably having his best season by far. You have Derek White, Nikola Vukovic, who I covered for the Bulls this past year, who was traded to Boston, is now finally able to free himself and to be able to play for a contending team in his advanced stage. And then also another team to look out for. I mentioned Detroit, mentioned Boston. Always intrigued to see how the Knicks will pan out. Yep. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement already in the first round of the series. You have the Thunder fulfilling expectations thus far. Obviously, anything can happen from this point on, but so far it's been an exciting time in the NBA playoffs in the first round.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of really interesting excitement going on out there, but we've just started, so who knows what's going to happen ahead of us, but some exciting things to come.
Another series to watch out for is the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. That's been a very exciting series. Timberwolves are up 3-2. Nuggets starting to make a little bit of an inroad, but they have Anthony Davis out indefinitely with a knee injury. They have Dante DiVincenzo out with an Achilles injury for the rest of the season. So there is a huge void that's there for the Timberwolves, especially in their offensive production. So they're going to have to rely on, say, Julius Randle being able to come through and be consistent as a scorer, as a playmaker. In Game 5, he scored 27 points and added 6 assists. So they're going to have to get more out of him and to be able to sustain that for the remainder of the series, especially going into a pivotal Game 6. Naz Reid is going to have to be the guy to clog the paint and be able to go toe-to-toe with Denver with players like Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, because they got the size, they got the strength, and so that works to their advantage. And then you need the bench players and you need the role players to come through, like Terrence Shannon Jr., who's an Illinois graduate, who was able to put 15 points on the board in Game 5. Rudy Gobert needs to come through and contain Jokic in the paint. You need Jaden McDaniels to be able to come through with his versatile play, especially when going up against someone as versatile as Jamal Murray. And we also have to clean up the turnovers. Keep in mind that in Game 5, a big reason why the Timberwolves lost is because they turned the ball over 25 times. And if you turn the ball over that many times, you're going to lose. And that's like emblematic of how some aspects of the way the NBA is played now is it's about pushing the tempo, it's about spacing, it's about all those particulars and just giving the ball away too frequently or being too unselfish at times and trying to make a no-look pass or trying to make a sweet pass or trying to get a good look out to somebody, and then in the process you end up turning the ball over too many times. So that needs to be cleaned up. And then last thing I'll say, just from a Bulls perspective, having covered them this past year, Ayo Dosunmu, who was traded to the Timberwolves back in February, is thriving as well. He scored 43 points. He scored 43 points in the last game. And so they're going to have to fill the void left behind by guys like Anthony Davis. And if the Timberwolves can do that, and if they can contain Denver in terms of their size, in terms of their strength, and to be able to score in bunches and get others involved, they'll win.
That's a kind of an interesting matchup, especially when you've got injuries that occurred, you've got dynamics that are still a little rocky going on. Do you feel like the hype is not so much about teams as much as it is about individual players specifically when it comes to the NBA? What do you feel like that hype around a player, once they're on this team, is going to fix things? Yes, I understand everybody has their own set of skills that they bring, right? But there's too much of a hype around certain star players coming in and just fixing an entire team.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, you take a guy like Wemby, for example, Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs, who's a generational talent and is likely going to be the face of the league in the years ahead. Obviously, everything goes through him. The San Antonio Spurs wouldn't be where they are now without him, and he has the good fortune of having the size and the strength as well as the versatility to be able to do what he's doing. And years ago, you wouldn't have a guy of his size being able to shoot from the three-point line in the way that he does, or to be trusted with shooting the three-point line. But now, because in the era of Kevin Durant, let's say, who in his own way revolutionized the way the power forward position is played or the four spot is played, then it's only fitting for a guy like Wemby to come in and to dominate in the way that he has thus far and will continue to dominate. And so obviously that's a case where it's really an individual that's carrying the team on his shoulders or is expected to carry the team on his shoulders and eventually carry them to the promised land. There's some good in that because it builds up hype, it builds up anticipation, and it also compels the other players to exceed or meet them at their level. So as a kid who grew up watching Michael Jordan, let's say with the Bulls, everything had to go through him. You had other assets. You had Scottie Pippen, you had Horace Grant, you had Bill Cartwright and John Paxson. And then in the second three-peat, you had Dennis Rodman, Ron Harper, Steve Kerr, Luke Longley, Tony Kukoc, etc. But they all had to get to where Michael was at. Michael forced them to get to play at his level so that way they can go out and win. Does Michael win those championships on his own? I would say no, because when he was on his own, in the first few years of his career when he was under Doug Collins as the head coach, and it was all about him and the ball was given to him. He takes the last shot. He carries the team. He's the face of the team. He's everything. They didn't win, but once you added all those pieces to it and filled those gaps, and then he had to take a step back and realize that he can't shoulder all of the burden. He has to delegate from time to time. Then they won. So you need that individual player to set the tone, but then you also need those other supportive roles to come in and to make it a great show. And sometimes when it comes to ring culture or who's the GOAT, Michael, LeBron, Kobe, Shaq or Wilt or Kareem or whoever. Like, those are fun debates. We do those just for the fun of it. And some of us are kind of cemented in our positions and never waver, and others are open to other examples. And so there's a lot of fun in that. There is a lot of fun in that, and there's a lot of nostalgia attached to it that the NBA really does rely upon. If you ask me, the NBA is one of the leagues, if not the league that is the best at nostalgia and marketing and infusing nostalgia to draw people in, because there's something about the NBA of years past that people still revere and people still miss, and they try to bring it back into the present day and try to connect that to the present day to appreciate the game in the present day. But then sometimes the discussion, to your point, it revolves back to it falls back to the individual when it's really a team sport. The whole debate about who's the greatest, you don't really hear. Sometimes you hear it about who the greatest team is in NBA history, but it's really more so about the individuals. Those are the conversations that are most frequently talked about. Debates that are most frequently hashed out is about who's the greatest player, not necessarily who has the greatest team. Whereas if you were, let's say, talking about baseball, there's more of a discussion. There's some discussion about who's the greatest player and whatnot, but there can be more frequent discussions about who are the greatest teams in baseball history. And so there's a bit of a difference there. And so that's where, at least from my vantage point, where things stand.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Zach. Yeah, that actually breaks it down really well. One last question before we get into your podcast as a co-host that you have there. But we're seeing some younger cores and in the NBA, some newer contenders, and they're challenging the older guard. Do you feel like that NBA is in the middle of a true power shift now?
I believe it's starting to get there and it's going to get there. I think we're starting to see the signs of it. You look at, I mentioned LeBron, he's still one of the top players in the league at his age, in his early 40s, still killing it, still rising to the occasion, still dominant, athletic, everything that you can imagine. But his time is eventually going to come. When that'll be is anyone's guess, but it will be sooner than you think. And then you look at a team like the Golden State Warriors, which has been the last NBA dynasty in recent memory. They've won 4 championships dating all the way back to 2015. Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. You know, Klay Thompson's no longer there, but they've had great players come down the pike. Steve Kerr will go down in history as one of the best coaches of his generation. But then you look at where the Warriors are at now, they're going to likely undergo a complete restructuring during the offseason. There's been a lot of talk about what the future holds for Steve Kerr, if he'll come back next season, or if he's going to segue into the front office, or if he's just going to call it quits altogether. There's even been talk about him coming in and potentially being considered as a candidate for the head coaching job for the Bulls after Billy Donovan left. And everybody that I've come across, and I myself have said, that's not going to happen because Steve Kerr, I genuinely believe, wants to retire pretty soon because he's done everything imaginable and the game isn't what it was when he first started coaching. And if he does continue coaching, he would want to coach for a contending team. He wouldn't want to coach for the Bulls because the Bulls are a bad team. And it's just the fact they're a bad team. I mean, we'll see what the offseason has in store for them as far as the draft and the draft lottery, where they come out as a result of it, who they're going to get as the new general manager, who's going to be the head coach. It's going to start from there. They got 2 first-round picks, courtesy of the Portland Trailblazers. It's going to be an interesting offseason to see if the Bulls are actually interested in chartering a new path, but Steve Kerr won't be on that path with them. I can guarantee you that. And then you also look at the Warriors in terms of Steph Curry, who's 38 years old, Draymond Green, who's 36. So eventually their heyday is going to come to an end sometime really soon. And they've been the ones who have been the face of the league for the last several years, including LeBron James. And so now what you're seeing is the emergence of this new cream of the crop talent in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, in Victor Wembanyama, in Anthony Edwards. Those are the players that the league is going to have to build around. And so I am seeing the signs there of potentially out with the old, in with the new. and it's going to be coming pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's my thought too. I think it's going to happen probably not overnight, but it's going to feel like it.
As it should,
Yeah.
because the sports, like everything else in life, is cyclical. Everything has its moments, it has its peaks, it has its valleys. It's just now time for a new generation to be able to get their shine in a big way. And it started with Magic and Larry back in the 80s.
Oh
Then
my
it's
goodness.
yeah, and I'm talking about just the popularity of the NBA as we know it to be can be
Yeah.
traced back to the 80s with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Then we get to the 90s with Michael Jordan. Then after that, in the early 2000s, you had Kobe and Shaq. Then LeBron comes along, and you've had great players come in between there. But ever since 2003, when LeBron came, LeBron has been a consistent presence. And then afterwards is when you started getting Steph Curry, you started getting Draymond Green, you started getting guys like Dirk Nowitzki. But you had great players come down the pike ever since then, Kevin Durant. Now it's SGA's turn, Wemby's turn, Anthony Edwards' turn.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see that shift. And I think it's not going to happen in the WNBA necessarily, but I think it's going to be cool to start seeing the WNBA grow, see a little bit of a shift in dynasty with the NBA. So it's some exciting moments for basketball coming up. Tell me a little bit about your cool podcast. She's Always Had a Game podcast. Tell us a little bit of how you started that and what you guys talk about.
Well, first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to my guy, Kevin Lewis, who is the co-host and co-producer of She's Always Had Game and one of the content creators on the 9450 network. And he's just a tremendous guy, tremendous talent, very passionate about basketball, women's basketball. And the 9450 network was started by Daniel Artest, or DA as we call him. And he's related to Ron Artest, former NBA player who now goes by Meta World Peace. And they do some amazing work there. And so I've had this idea in mind for quite some time about wanting to celebrate the history of women's basketball, because that's a history that has largely been untold. It's just now in this moment where women's basketball is starting to ascend to new heights that more and more people are starting to take an interest in it. And this meets the moment in terms of reminding people that, hey, this history goes all the way back as far as time can tell. It didn't just happen in a vacuum, and it didn't just happen right here and there. It didn't start with Caitlin Clark. It didn't start with Angel Reese. They're continuing it, but it goes all the way back. And we wanted to celebrate that history. We wanted to reflect upon great moments in women's basketball history, some that people remember, some that they don't remember, and also highlight some of those pioneers in the game that have really chartered a course for women's basketball to be able to thrive. So we've been through 2 episodes already, and we've had some incredible guests. Yeah, we've had Emma Bacciarelli of Sports Illustrated and Jordan Robinson, who just wrote a new book called Court Queens that celebrates women's basketball history. Wow. We had them on our first episode. We just got done with an episode about the 2007 Rutgers women's basketball team that made an improbable run to the national championship game. I mean, we had Brittany Wallace, who's one of their players. And I will say right now, we're in the works of getting somebody who I consider a friend now. I've interviewed a few times, Ruthie Bolton, on our podcast, who was an original WNBA player and was also a member of the historic 1996 Olympic team that paved the way for the WNBA. Because keep in mind, to make a long story short, in 1995, just 1 year before the Olympics in Atlanta, David Stern, who was then the commissioner of the NBA, worked with Val Ackerman, who was a liaison for USA Basketball at the time, who just recently retired as the commissioner of the Big East. They wanted to work together to come up with a women's professional basketball league, and they felt as though their best chance to initiate that was the success of Team USA at the Atlanta Olympics. So what happened is that they brought together some of the best collegiate players and some of the best American players who had played internationally, get them together, put them on a 59-game exhibition tour around the world in preparation for 8 more games to be played in Atlanta. And the thing was, Ashley, is that they could not afford to lose. They had to play every single game and win every single game. Just one loss, and it likely would have been over. We wouldn't have a WNBA most likely if they had lost one single game. So they had to, so they had to put it all on the line, and they did it. They 59 exhibition games, they won every single one. 8 games at the Olympics, they won every single one.
That's incredible.
And then that same year is when the WNBA was launched and it was approved. And the players that were on that team, Rebecca Lobo, Cheryl Swoops, Lisa Leslie, Dawn Staley, Ruthie Bolton, Carla McGee, I can go on and on. Teresa Edwards, they paved the way. They charted a course. So to circle back to what I said earlier about the All-Star game needing to be in Atlanta, this is why. Because it's been 30 years since the Atlanta Olympics and 30 years since that team essentially saved women's basketball in America.
Wow.
Why not have the All-Star game in Atlanta?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Wow. That's really cool.
I even asked Ruthie Bolton this when I interviewed her, and also I interviewed her for SB Nation twice. The second story was because the 1996 Olympic team is being inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts this August. So it was about that. And I asked her about that, and she even agreed that the All-Star game should have been in Atlanta because it would have been a true full circle moment. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, the All-Star game will be in Chicago. It'll be at the United Center. It'll be great. And chances are they're going to do something to honor the team. So this summer, what me and Kevin intend to do is to make an episode of She's Always Had Game that's dedicated to the 96 Olympic team and have players from that team come on, like Ruthie, Kevin. I'm sure Kevin wouldn't mind saying this. Kevin knows Cheryl Swoops, so get them on. Maybe get 1 or 2 more players on, and just have a conversation about the legacy of that team. So She's Always Had Game is the name of our podcast on the 9450 network, and it's me and Kevin Lewis.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely go and check that out because, as you guys can tell, Zach is very knowledgeable about sports, and definitely I can tell you have a huge passion for the NBA, the WNBA specifically. And this sounds like a really great podcast. I'm going to have to go listen to it. How cool to have such historic moments happening on your podcast too. That's just incredible. So I appreciate you popping on here and sharing with us. Is there any words of wisdom that you wish you'd known prior?
I would just say, Ashley, to that younger version of myself who was going through periods of depression, anxiety, wrestling with vulnerabilities and uncertainty, just keep going. Keep going. You'll find that there is a life beyond your circumstance, that you will get through this, that these times are temporary. They may be hard, they may be difficult, but they're only temporary, and you're only going to come out stronger on the other side of it. And you're going to enter into territories that you never thought were possible. And also to remind you that it's never too late. It's never too late to pick up where you left off or to start all over again and to pursue your dreams, and that anything's possible. Don't let anything stop you. Don't let the naysayers stop you. Don't let age stop you. Don't let none of those things. Don't let yourself stop you. If you get down, and I'll admit, there are times when I can get down. There are times when I feel like I'm holding myself back or I'm not accomplished enough or whatnot. But I always try to remind myself that there's plenty more life to live and that there are plenty more opportunities to seek out. All you got to do is just seek them out and take advantage of them, and you never know what those opportunities will turn into. And so I would just say to that person, stay the course, believe in yourself, and you'll come out a lot stronger and a lot better as a result of it.
Oh, I appreciate that. The imposter syndrome is real, and I think it's crazy that you're saying that because you're so knowledgeable and you've got such a cool heart for sports. You know names and places. It's incredible. You're a very talented person. So I think that's a really good, just keep pushing on, and no matter what, you're going to be able to accomplish your goals. Just keep working at it. So yeah, appreciate that. Thanks so much, Zach. And guys, thanks for tuning in. We will see you back here next time.